Good. It's always, the start is always stunted. It's always a clumsy start to the videos. That's how it goes. We're in the middle of chapter 8 on page Chavav in our booklets. We spoke about the reish, the unholy side, and we said that when you lack the humility and the surrender to the mashpia, in this case we're talking about the surrender to holiness, so then you don't have anything. Because what happens is you get caught up in pursuing extras, and you then lose sight and focus on the vital things, the most important things in life, and you drive yourself a little crazy. So you're constantly pursuing extras, the extra dollar, and while doing that, you lose sight of what's important. So you don't have the extra dollar that you're constantly pursuing, and at the same time, you're eroding all the important things in life. So that's why it says that the unholiness has nothing. The unholy has nothing. When you lack that humility, then you have nothing. So even if you have a lot, like in the case of Esav, we gave you the example where Esav says, I have a lot, but since the focus in saying I have a lot implies that you're constantly pursuing more, that you're never satisfied with what you have, you're constantly pursuing more. So therefore, even that you have, you don't appreciate, you're always looking for more, so it's as if you have nothing. And not only is it as if you have nothing, but ultimately you end up having nothing because you end up squandering and losing all the things that are very vital and important to you in life. Then we said that beyond this, you would think that if somebody is pursuing all these extras in life, and so therefore endangering his own life and going crazy to try and get the things that are unnecessary, things he doesn't need, that's where he's consumed by that. So if his life starts falling apart, you would think that would humble him a little bit, and you'd come to your senses. So that's where we continue and said in the beginning of chapter 8, that to the contrary, that this attitude of unholiness, of lacking bittul, of lacking this humility, leads to even more arrogance. The person becomes more stubborn and more arrogant. And that's the example of Paray, where Pharaoh was blessed by Jacob, when he came to Egypt. Joseph brings him down to Egypt, and introduces him to Pharaoh, and Jacob blesses Pharaoh. What was the blessing he gave him? So the commentaries explain that he blessed him that the Nile should rise and overflow at his feet. And that's how Egypt was sustained. The Nile would overflow, and that's how everything grew. So Pharaoh says, the Nile is mine, I made it, I made myself, I made it. He takes credit for everything. Even though he knew that the truth was it was all thanks to Jacob's blessing. So that even the blessings that he has, he doesn't appreciate. Not only is not appreciated, he's arrogant and outright lies about it and says, no, he takes all the credit for himself. So it only fuels greater arrogance. So now the question in the middle of chapter 8 is, how could that be? Ultimately, everything we have comes from holiness. Even the unholy is created by God. And so the energy that's in the unholiness that brings it into existence at any moment ultimately is a godly energy. So if that's the case, how could it be that the unholy, the ungodly, should take that energy that it gets from godliness and be able to pervert it to such an extent that it only inflates his own ego? So that's where we are in the middle of chapter 8. So we're on the last paragraph on page Chavav, Ulahavinzeh. So Ulahavinzeh, to understand this idea, that what? The hein emes shaklipas mekablim rak mehashpah chitzenis dechitzenis. It's true that the unholiness only gets a very limited amount of divine energy. But ultimately, even this little minute amount of divine energy that it gets, godly energy gets, is from holiness. How is it possible that as a result of it, it becomes more of a yesh, more of a inflated, separate entity? In other words, when you have unholiness gets a limited amount of energy, so I understand why it would feel its own existence. But ultimately, how could it take the godly energy that it does get and turn it around and use that to inflate itself? To say, the Nile is mine, I made myself. So we'll understand it based on the explanation given by the Rebbe Rashab, that the reason why this picks itself up and is arrogant is the unholy doesn't, because the godly energy is not shining openly in it. And not only is it not shining openly, but it's actually trapped, it's exiled within it. In other words, everything like we said, everything has a divine energy that sustains it. So the question is, what's the nature of the relationship between the divine energy that animates something and brings it into existence and the thing that's being brought into existence? By understanding the nature of that relationship, we'll understand why the unholy has the ability to become more arrogant as a result of it. So what's he say? The point is like this. Things that God desires, that he wants, he's invested in intimately. Just like a person who there's something that you're passionate about, that you're interested in, so you throw yourself into it entirely. So you're actively involved in it, you're fully there, you're present in that moment, in that experience, in that project, whatever it is, you're fully invested. But what happens if there's something that you're not so interested in? You do it because you have to do it, or you do it for another reason, for ulterior motives or purposes. You're not invested in it. So the energy you're putting into it is like the analogy of somebody who's you give something to your friend. You want to give your friend a gift, so you give it to him with a smile and with warmth and with a certain feeling of closeness. But if it's somebody that you don't want to give something to, I'm sorry? Wholeheartedness. But if there's somebody that you have an enemy and you have to give him something, so you give it to him like throwing something over your shoulder. There's no personal connection that takes place, even though you're giving him something. So when there's holiness, God's invested in it. That's something he wants. So the energy is invested in it. Since the energy is invested in it, it feels the object or the thing or the creation or the person accepts it and feels it and experiences that holy energy. But if it's something that he doesn't like, and unholiness is something that God despises, God despises the unholy. So there, the energy goes into it, but it's not with a closeness, and therefore it's trapped within the unholy. What does it mean that God despises the unholy? He creates it. What does it mean he doesn't want it? We've explained earlier, one of the earlier classes, God only creates the unholy for something else. God creates the unholy so that we have free choice, so that we don't choose it. In other words, he doesn't desire unholy, he desires that we don't have the unholy. For that reason, he creates it. So he's creating it just like you have to give somebody something, you don't want to give it to him, and so therefore you give it in a different way. So the unholy receives the divine energy in a different way than holy things receive the divine energy. And therefore the divine energy is within it, it's trapped within it. And let's flesh this thought out a little bit more here. When the energy and flow from above comes on the holy side, as it's drawn to the Jewish people, because since they are vessels to receive godliness, they have the capacity to receive this energy from above. Why is it that they receive that energy? Because they're bottled, they're nullified, they're open to God. As explained in Tanya, that the holiness only rests upon something that is surrendered to God and nullified before him. So therefore, this divine energy is revealed within them and is unified with them. However, on the unholy side, since they are essentially not vessels to receive this divine energy, why is it that they're not able to receive this energy? Because they are separate from God. Like the Pasuk says, God separated them to all the other nations. Meaning, what does it mean that he Cholak Hashem Elikecha? The Pasuk is talking about the warning against idolatry. And it says that you shouldn't be seduced and go astray by the sun and the stars and the moon that God gave, Chalak Hashem Lekecha, that God gave to shine to the entire world. So, but the term that he uses, that he sort of gave it, dispatched it to shine, is Asher Chalak. What does it mean? Why is it that people worship the sun and the moon and the stars and the forces of nature? Because Chalak Hashem, he sort of separated them. He separated them, so to speak, from his oneness. In other words, you see them as a separate entity, as something separate, something a part of God. And that's why it's worshipped. Idolatry is essentially the notion that there's something outside of God, something separate from him, which is hepech habitul, the opposite of humility, of this nullification. So therefore, the divine energy is not enclosed within them and doesn't unite with them, but rather it finds itself within them as if in exile. So why is it that the unholy What we're trying to get to, how is it that it can become arrogant? How is it that as a result of the energy it receives from holiness, it becomes more disconnected from God? So the reason is because the energy it gets is trapped within them. Why is the energy trapped within them? Because they're not vessels to be able to receive the energy. Why are they not vessels to receive the energy? Because they feel separate. They feel a separate existence. They feel separate and apart from God. Once you feel that separateness from God, and therefore you're not surrendered to God, that energy doesn't come. In other words, divine... Right, so what does that mean? You are batal, you're not batal. God says you have such a fragile ego that he can't give anything to somebody who feels also proud of himself. No, everybody has to just acknowledge God's supremacy and his greatness. What does that mean? Holiness means oneness. Holiness is godliness. What's holy is godly, and God is one. So if you feel your own self, your own separateness from God, that's a denial of God. In the deepest sense, it's a denial of God. Not being humbled or nullified before God, meaning I feel my own separate existence. When I feel my own separate existence, I'm denying God's ultimate oneness. So that's what it means, that you can't have it both ways. You can't feel your own existence at the same time feel God's existence. That's a contradiction. It's either God is one, there's nothing else, or there's you. You can't have both. So the unholy, the fact that it's not batal means it's not open to receiving God's oneness, because it's protesting and saying, no, I also exist. So when you feel that sense of self, that sense of otherness, you're no longer able to receive that oneness, that energy. So the unholy is essentially not capable of receiving it. Why? God separated from, meaning that it feels its own otherness, its own separateness, and therefore it can't receive that energy.
It's on a different level than, say, our non-vital God.
Right, well, everything is to degrees, but here we're talking about its essential character. The unholy is being like... Yeah, well, that's the challenge, that we have to become more edel and more batal and more refined, and more sensitive, more open to God. And the more open we are, the more we get. The more we can feel God. The less sensitive we are, the less we feel. So, this idea that you have to be a proper vessel to receive that divine energy, we can understand based on the idea of reincarnation. Now, there are two types of reincarnation. We're all reincarnated souls. We're all old souls that have lived before and are living again now, reincarnated into a new body, But then there's another form of reincarnation, and there's nothing wrong with that kind of reincarnation. That's how it is. A soul has a certain destiny, a certain purpose and mission, and sometimes it takes many lifetimes for it to realize and fulfill that purpose. But then there's another type of reincarnation, which is a sort of a way to cleanse the soul, to purify the soul, to rid it of whatever unholiness attached itself to it. So that is when a human soul is reincarnated into an animal or into other things. And that's something that's sort of a punishment for the soul. So being reincarnated into another human body, that's not you wouldn't call that a punishment. That's not a form of purification. It's just the next stage in the soul's life story. But when it's reincarnated into an animal, what does that mean? It doesn't mean that when a human soul goes into an animal, it doesn't mean that now a person finds himself as an animal. So he's intelligent, that he's thinking, and the animal's brain is a human brain that has all this energy, but all it can do is moo and eat grass. It wants to eat pancakes, but all it can do is eat grass. That's not what it means. The animal is an animal. It's a full-fledged animal that behaves as a full-fledged animal. But in addition to the animal's soul that's within it, there's also a human soul that gets trapped in it. It's attached to the animal. It doesn't affect the animal anyway. As we're going to see. Why does it not affect the animal? Because a human soul doesn't go into an animal. It's not invested in an animal. Everything has a soul. That doesn't.
How does it affect the soul, though?
So the soul is pained. The soul is trapped. That's the meaning of it being exiled. The soul is trapped in the animal. So let's see what he has to say. This idea, every living being, every creation has a soul, meaning it has a divine spark that creates it. But within the different categories, you have the mineral, and you have the vegetative, you have the animal, and then you have the human. It's not that the souls of all these different categories in creation are just different degrees. One's more sophisticated than the next. They're fundamentally different. They're essentially different. It's not that a flower has the same soul as a rock, but it's a fundamentally different soul. And similarly, between the animal and the flower, it's fundamentally different. And certainly the biggest gap would be between the animal and the human. The human is a fundamentally different soul. So it's not just that there's more soul involved in it, therefore it could be more sophisticated. It's a fundamentally different soul that goes in a different place. So the soul being enclosed into a body is like light into a vessel, which does what? When you have a light in a vessel, the light affects the vessel, and the vessel affects the light. They affect each other. Why? Because the body is designed and capable of receiving, it's prepared to receive the soul. In other words, the body, the material of the body, is relative to its soul. So therefore they have two things happening. The body affects the soul, and the soul affects the body. To the point that they're totally united as one, where you can't separate between your body and your soul. Whereas when we're talking about reincarnation, where the soul of a human ends up in the body of an animal, it doesn't affect the animal, to the extent that the animal is not even aware that it has a human soul attached to it. Because it doesn't have it's not capable to receive it. So just like any energy that you can't take, if you're going to put gasoline in an electric car, it's not going to do anything. You're going to break the car because the car is not designed to receive gasoline, and therefore putting in gasoline, even though it's fuel and even though it makes another type of car go, but it's not going to make this car go. And he gives another analogy. So you have this idea of Gilgulim, which is that the animal is not a vessel to receive, the animal body is not a vessel to receive a human soul, and therefore if a human soul is attached to it, it is frustrated within it. The animal doesn't feel the soul, and the soul doesn't affect the animal, so both things don't happen. And the same thing is, he gives another analogy. Like a person who's tied up in a sack. He doesn't do anything to the sack. A person has to wear clothing. When we wear clothing that are tailored to our bodies, that fit us, clothing that are designed to our tastes, that convey a certain message about us. We wear them, and there's a connection between us and our clothing. Even though they're separate things, even though clothing are inanimate, but there's some type of a connection there. But take a person and tie them up in a bag. Take a person and wrap them up in a duffel bag. You don't have anything. They're two separate things. The sack is not able to affect. The sack is not. The sack is not made to receive the person. The person is not meant to be stuck in a sack. So if you have a person tied up in a duffel bag, what do you have? You have a very angry person, and nobody sees anything. You have nothing. It doesn't fit. It doesn't connect. Similarly, we have energies. We have the capacity to see, for instance. So the capacity to see needs to go into an eye. When you have the capacity to see, that potential to see, and you put it into an eye, now you can see. But if you put that capacity into your hand, will the hand be able to see? No, because the hand is not designed. It's not a keli, it's not a vessel that's capable of seeing. So you can put all the energy for sight, as much of that energy as you want into the hand, it'll never see. And the energy will be frustrated, the hand will be frustrated, because the hand won't do what it has to do, the energy won't do what it has to do.
The hand doesn't even realize that.
It does, right? So there has to be a fit that has to be connected. So here we said by the person. So you have the same thing by reincarnation, that the soul doesn't affect the animal, and the animal doesn't affect the soul, other than that everybody's frustrated. And the same thing is a person who's tied up in a sack. He doesn't change anything in the sack. So the same thing is when we're talking about the divine energy that's given to Klippa and Sitracha, to the unholy, even this minimal amount of energy, which we said is only the external of the external, which actually enters this thing to animate it, it's not in a way that it's enclosed in it. Kivan shebe etzem ein klip v'srachak limuksher, since the klip and sitrach, the unholy, is not a proper vessel to receive it. Like we said earlier, that it's as if it's an exile in it. It's exiled within it. What did we say earlier? Since the unholy is not batul, it doesn't surrender, it doesn't submit, it sees itself as its own entity, so therefore even the energy it receives, it's not able to receive it properly. So there's energy in it which animates it, which brings it into existence, but at the same time that energy doesn't affect it because it's not able to receive that energy. So originally we said before chapter 8, at the beginning we were talking about that unholy receives a little bit of divine energy. And that explains why the unholy, why you end up with nothing and drive somebody crazy, etc. But then we said, how does it cause the person to be arrogant? So we said, because even though it's not just that you're getting a little bit of energy, but the energy you're getting is not received. The unholy can't receive it. It's not a vessel for it. It's not a receptacle for it. And therefore, the energy is trapped within it, is exiled within it, and consequently doesn't affect it. So even though you would think that when you have holiness entering into something, when you have a blessing from God, God blesses you. So if you're able to receive that blessing, meaning you're a little sensitive, you're a little humble, you recognize it comes from Hashem, it comes from God, so then you can appreciate it, and then it does humble you. But if you're arrogant, so it doesn't matter how much you're getting. You're getting a lot, you're getting a little, it will never penetrate, it won't affect you, it won't impact you. Because you're not sensitive to it. So therefore, not only does this divine energy not cause the person to be somewhat humbled, to the contrary, it only inflates the attitude and the ego and the separateness that the unholiness feels. It becomes more separate. To say that the now is mine, I made everything, to deny that energy. Since you already have that ego, so the more you get from Kedusha, the more energy you're going to get. That only serves to inflate the ego. So you take it, and it's trapped within it, doesn't have the proper effect, and that's the result of it. We're chapter 9. As we said earlier, we started this conversation. Why is it that the klipa is not a keli, doesn't receive, and why is it that it doesn't, and therefore whatever it does get from holiness, it only perverts and only uses it to inflate its own ego? Is because the klipa is missing the central fundamental principle of bittul, the aziras garma, making yourself small, humbling yourself. Without this sensitivity, this humility, making yourself small of the receiver, this causes that the mashpia, the giver, also lacks in the sensitivity and the humility to give. And therefore, what results is l'rosh ein kol. The rosh, or the reish, as we're talking about here, is lacking koil. He's lacking that connection. We said koil is yisoid, meaning he's lacking the connection. There's no connection between giver and receiver. So yes, the giver is giving. God gives, he sustains the unholy, but there's no connection between the holy and the unholy. And why is it? Since the unholy itself is not sensitive to God, so therefore that causes sin. This is a very interesting point here. It's the makabel, the receiver, is what causes the giver to want to give. So since the makabel is not interested in receiving, is not interested in submitting himself to the giver, so therefore the giver also lacks that. So how do we fix this problem? You have an unholy world that's not sensitive to God, and it's getting its divine energy, and all it's doing is becoming less sensitive to God, becoming more of an independent appearance of an independent existence. So the solution to this is the service of Bnei Yisrael, Tzadik Yisoid Olam. As we said, the Tzadik Yisoid Olam, that refers to even the Yisoid Olam, the Yisoid meaning that bonding factor, that bonds. That is the son, in the analogy we brought earlier in the Maimer, for whom we had that whole lineage of tzimtzum, that through him, through this avodah of a yid, of bonding, fusing heaven and earth, everything comes down to this world. As is known, the interpretation of the words, it says, we say in the evening service, we say, Hashem rolls back light because of the darkness, meaning the darkness gives way to light. Simply means he removes the light for the darkness to give way to night, and then he removes night to give way to day. But there's a Chassidish taich that's brought in Chassidus. It's actually originally, interestingly, this vart is from Reb Zalman Zezmer, a Chassid of the Alter Rebbe. And the Rebbe Rashab remarked about it. He said that this is it's like a the Chassidish taich of a simple weekday Ma'ariv, that he was able to appreciate this idea. That the Eibishter gives way, removes the light, which is the light that's before the tzimtzum, for night, meaning tzimtzum, for that limitation, for that concealment, and then he removes that darkness for what? For the light that comes afterwards. So as it's explained in the Chassidus, what does that mean, the light that comes afterwards? For light to be able to puncture through darkness, it has to be even stronger. It has to be a stronger light, meaning that the light that was there before the tzimtzum, that was removed, the siluka or the light that's from before the tzimtzum that was removed, that's one level of light. But the light that can then pierce through the darkness and shine even after the darkness, that's a much stronger light. It's a higher light. That's the Eira Atzmi, the essence of Hashem. And the Rebbe explains it even deeper that it's within these words, Chayshech mipnei Eir, that the light comes from the darkness. Meaning the level of darkness, the Yashish Chayshach Sisrei, the level of darkness that refers also to Eibishter in the highest level. That's the light that's accessed after the Tzimtzum. So we're talking about receiving this great light, the Kanal Be'in Ben Peris Yosef, Ben Peris Halayin, as we explained with the concept of Ben Peris Yosef, we're talking about bringing the highest levels down to the lowest place into this world, Shen Remezes Ben Mishkan Migdash, which is alluded to in the Mishkan and the Migdash, Hachal Mekashe Mishkan, starting with the beams, the pillars of the Mishkan. Shagam b'hareish yitosef yud ma'achariv, that also the reish should then also have this yud. Should also the yid through his service causes the physical world to be humbled, to have this yud, which then hainu abitul dezir garma, meaning it makes itself small. Once you have the yud of the makabel, so then you have the yud of the mashpia. That causes him to be a proper and prepared to receive the yud from above, the biyud nivrei lam haba. Hagili denoim avaya, which, as we said, the yud nivrei lam, that's the gili of the pleasure of God, which is the highest of levels. That's through the tzaddik yisoidim, the level of yisoid, the bonding of heaven and earth. This is all achieved through the avodah v'yid of learning Torah and doing mitzvahs during the 6th millennium of the existence of the universe, especially now when we're right on the heels of Mashiach, right at the doorstep of Mashiach. When now things seem to be in the most constrained, limited way, the darkest way. From this darkness, that causes us to call out to Yudke. So since we can call out to God almost as a result of this concealment, as a result of this darkness, that causes that we bring from the highest levels, from the merchav. So the highest level of revelation, which ultimately brings down the revelation of the final redemption. When we, like as we said, v'nigla kveid havaya, v'nigla daika, when we're going to reveal the glory of havaya, not just Elohim, the concealment, but havaya, the revelation of the divine essence. And the pasuk tells it to us. He says it will be revealed. When Mashiach comes, it will be revealed. Not as we talked about earlier. Also, we dealt with this. The redemption will reveal what's already there, meaning, this already exists. This is already the true reality. It's just hidden. It's not just that the loss of it would merely reveal what's already there, but it'll be more than I'm sorry, excuse me. The achievement of La'asalavi will be not that it will be something new, a new reality, but it will reveal what's already hidden, and it will reveal it to an extent that the flesh will see afilu behemis v'chayis, canal, even the animals will be able to perceive this idea. This will be immediately, as we said, when the glory of God will be revealed, and all flesh will see together that it's the Havaya that has spoken everything into existence.